Welcome to SB 405D Project Management. My name is Felicia Friedai, then Akop, and I'll be taking you through this as well. Then we're going to focus our discussion on project risk and quality management, Unit 6. Specifically, our discussion is going to center on Session 1, which is looking at project environmental context, risk, and sources of risk. By the end of this session, you should be able to define what the project environment is. You should be able to define what project risk is and state some sources of project risk as well. So to begin off, we're going to look out for the project environment. When we're looking at the project environment, we are basically looking out for all that encompasses the business, things within, things outside, things that actually are able to influence or have an influence on the business. And so you realize that yes, the business will take inputs or raw materials from the environment. The business is going to use some environmental things to what? Process, add value, and they're going to put it back into the organization, into the environment. And so everything encompassing the business within and outside, they all affect or influence the business. And so when we're looking at the project environment, they can be broadly categorized under these types. There could be operational environment, which is needed for the day-to-day work of the business. Physical environment, those that we see. So we have our buildings, we have our equipment, and all of those, which are physical environment. You have the ecological environment. These days, you have to be ecologically friendly. You're not just you think about the environment and how safe you can make it and make it fit for even human lives now and then for future. We have the social environment where people come in and they matter. We have the cultural environment. We're talking about globalization these days. People come with different ways of life, different styles, and you need to be able to work with all of these. There's economic aspect as well. And we know that no matter where you are, the economic crisis and things, they would affect you. So when it comes to exchange rates, interest rates, and all those policies and economic issues, they have a way they affect what your business, and they have a way they're going to affect what your project as well. We have the psychological issues or the psychological environment, which is also very key when it comes to project environment. We have the financial environment. Money is important. Your project won't work without the cost function. And so your financial environment also comes in the organizational environment, because at the end of the day, you also have to have your systems, policies, procedures in there, which is going to be what help you achieve those objectives of the project. And so the project environment, yes, there are a lot of things which are in there, but they are all very much interrelated, and it can be more complex depending on the size or even the type of business you are into as well. When it comes to risk and the sources of risk, what is basically risk? Risk is actually anything which the consequences of your exposure to something you didn't really would plan for it. Usually, they're not the most positive things, they're usually more negative. And then they kind of affect the objective you have for your project. So, anything that really is going to have an impact on your project and what you didn't plan for, they are all risk you have to look out for. So the outcome of risk is the probability of a loss or a gain. Some risks come and then they bring with good gains, but usually risk can give us losses as well. So it could be either good or bad. And then the most important thing about risk is that it's always a variation from the desired plan outcome. So you're expecting to get A, and something happens, and before you realize you're having a B. Something happens before you realize you're getting an A plus. Those are the word deviations or variations from what you had actually planned out for your project or set as your project outcome. So the positive and negative side of risk is what we term as opportunities and threats. So opportunity is the positive one, and then the negative is what we call the threat. So when you're looking at a risk, it's either positive or it's negative. So are some of the sources of project risk. The project risk, like I made mention earlier, we're saying that there are things which you didn't plan for. Now there's a likelihood of something actually happen and the consequence of that thing happening, when that thing happens, is going to have an impact on your business. And it's also looking at the ease of which you can what detect that thing. So when it comes to measuring risk, it comes looking at risk, you have to first look out for the probability. What's the chances of that thing happening? Is it 20%, 30%, is it 40%? If it's one or it is 100%, that means that that thing is surely going to happen. So there's that likelihood we need to consider. We need to look at the impact. If that thing truly happens, how is it going to affect us with our project outcomes or our project objectives? And then we then need to also look out for how easy it is for us to actually detect that potentially, if we are doing a construction something, some people may fall and get hurt, and so we may have to put in this control measures or something, or potentially some will pilfer some of the cement and all those things. These are things we can easily detect a bit as some of the risks to the system. So when it comes to project risk, they can broadly be classified under these two. So the broad classification is that it's either known or it is unknown. Known are those things that they've identified through the risk identification process. So like I made mention that once you're constructing, sometimes things like pilfering of cement, sand, and all those ones, we know that some of the employers, they will take some, the employees will take some away. You know that things like theft, when it comes to embezzlement, when you're working with money, if you are doing a project which involves a lot of money, you have to be very careful, because those are the finance part. If you don't take care, some of the money would go somewhere unaccounted. So those are known things. And then we have some which are unknown. You really identify them when you're doing the risk identification process. The various risks you think could apply to that project. There are some that would skip you, there are some that there's no way it will even cross your mind, and they would happen as well. Then we also have what we call the subway uncertainty, and we have the coconut uncertainty. So when it comes to the subway uncertainty, the thing is that they can be modeled and reasonably incorporated when you are predicting or doing the assumption. So sometimes something like your forecasting errors and all those ones, yes, those ones are the subway uncertainty. Then you have the coconut uncertainty. For these ones, they cannot be modeled, and they are usually very rare and unique events which are sometimes hard to envision. I don't think anybody who was working on projects as at 2018, 2017 thought of something like a pandemic like COVID, which would come and then disrupt work no matter which industry you found yourself. That was a coconut uncertainty. We all didn't envision it. It was rare, it was unique, and it just happened like that. And so for this one, they cannot be evaluated in advance. You can only do it afterwards. Yeah, so that's the another different type of risk as well. Other forms of uncertainty can be also grouped based on the source, where they are coming from. So if it is regarding to estimates, there's a variability associated with estimates. Sometimes your estimations, you may go and realize that in fact you will realize that the estimate is something else from what is really happening on the ground. Uncertainty about the basis of estimation. So even when you want to buy things, some will be like, oh, use the historic cost, use what was the price. Some will say, no, 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 use the current market price. Some will even say that no, project and add some percentage, and they use the future prices as well. So even the basis for estimation can be a bit tricky when you want to even work with it. So uncertainty about the basis, uncertainty about the design and logistic can also come in. Uncertainty when it comes to even the objectives and then the priority, especially for complex projects where you may have, yes, one main goal or objectives, but then a lot of sub goals or objectives. Sometimes prioritizing and letting know which one is more important or which one needs to be solved before the other can become a challenge as well. And then the fundamental relationship between the project parties or stakeholders also can come with uncertainties. So there's a need for us to actually have a risk management framework to help us in delving with risk. So there's a need for us to first analyze and then identify and then analyze and respond to risk as and when they would occur in the product life cycle. And there are 6 major phases which are included in the process. The first is to establish the context, and then we do the risk identification, all the risks that potentially can come up on the project we are working on. We need to be able to identify it. Then when you are done, we need to be able to analyze the risk. What is the probability of this working? What is the how is it going to look like just in case it happened? What could be the impact it's going to have and all those ones. So when you analyze the risk carefully, it's going to help you even with your risk assessment, where you're now going to see the numbers. If this should happen, what's the probability? Maybe it's 20%. If it happens like this, the impact is going to be X. This is how it's going to affect the project. Maybe it's going to even lead to termination of the project or not. Maybe this is a risk that can happen, but then it won't have so much impact. It can happen, but then we won't really feel it much. That's where you do the assessment as well. Then you do the evaluation of the risk, which is more, which is higher, which is least. You can then do the evaluation and look at how to work with it. Then you can then do the response planning. So just in case, therefore, perhaps this thing happens, how then do you solve it, or how then do you go around it? We need to be proactive, but we also need to be reactive. So proactively, you plan towards it just in case this happens. Contingency planning. So you put in the response planning process in there. Then you have the monitoring and control. So you have to be watching out for those kind of risks just in case they shoot up. Then you know how to check it or put in place corrective measures to get the results you wanted. So some of the sources, common sources of project risk is one, top management not recognizing the activity as a project. So sometimes they are introducing something new or they are working on something new and they don't see it as a project. They think it's a normal activity in there. That can also bring some risk in there. Too many projects going on at the same time. We have it a lot. So this is going, before you realize a lot of things are going wrong in there. Impossible schedule commitments can also be a challenge. No functional input into the planning phase. Very important. Then no one is responsible for the total project. There's no project manager. There's no one in charge of it. Someone has to be accountable for it. Poor control design for changes. Problems with team members. Poor control of custom changes. Poor understanding of project manager's job. Wrong persons are assigned as project managers. No integrated planning and control. Organizations' resources being overcommitted, unrealistic planning and scheduling, no project cost accounting ability, conflicting project priorities, poor organizational project office. All of these can actually be a source of project risk. So these are about 16 common sources of project risk out there, and the list keeps going on. A lot of things can go wrong, even including unforeseen regulatory requirements. You realize in the COVID time there came a regulation that every place wherever you are, there's supposed to be some sort of COVID protocols and all those ones, and they were mandatory, and you had to go by it. Natural disasters can happen, like this Turkey earthquake thing. It was unforeseen. It brought its own risk in there for people who are doing projects there. There's vandalism, sabotage, and unpredicted side effects in there. We see even people in SS and primary schools and things destroying things, sort of project. Your employees may get angry and then decide to just spoil everything you worked on in there as well. There's market or operational risk going into the market. There's social risk. There's inflation. There's currency rate fluctuations. In Ghana, I realized 2022 was a bit shaky when it comes to the fluctuations in inflation and all those ones. There's inadequate funds, increase in interest rates, the media, yes, the radio, TV, and all the media, print and non-print, they all contribute. Technological changes, the risk which stems from the design process, violating trade marks and licenses, being sued for breach of contract, labor or workplace problem, litigation due to a tout of the law, then legislations. All of these are sources of project risk. These are about 33 different sources of project risk, And these are things that really can actually happen on projects. And so depending on how complex your project is, and then the number you'd really see in there or at play in there, but these are very, very essential to take note of. So in this session, we introduce you to the project environment and project risk, as well as some sources of project risk. Thank you.